Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to our Parenting Today lecture series. We're still on week 5, now moving on to part number 4, talking about managing teen emotions. Research tells us that extracurricular activities can be a source of self-esteem and confidence building among teens. And we know that teens who are involved are more likely to have higher self-esteem, high academic achievement, and lower substance abuse. And in cases of severe depression, we want to really reiterate to parents of teens it's important to seek professional help and treat it as you would a physical illness like diabetes, cardiac disease. One thing, as a licensed mental health professional, that I would love to see here in the United States is that if children could be taken to have a mental health screening by a professional, credentialed, licensed mental health professional, at least once during childhood and then again in adolescence, at these intervals that we know where children and teens statistically are at higher risk for things. It's widely accepted practice here in the United States that children will begin seeing a dentist every 6 months to a year, not because we anticipate that these kids are going to have tons of cavities, right? It's sort of a preventative type of a measure, right? That we want to have like an early intervention or early diagnosis if there is a problem. So it would be wonderful if we could have these type of services, if that would be something that would be covered by major insurance plans. As it stands right now, the only way that most people can get mental health services paid for by an insurance company is if a person actually has a diagnosis of a mental health problem. But how great would it be if we were to be able to have these routine screenings by a licensed mental health professional for children, among adolescents. So it's definitely something to think about. Now switching our focus to talk about self-identity. Remember, we talked about Erik Erikson, and he discussed those 8 stages, took more of a lifespan approach, really acknowledged the importance of social interaction in human development. And Erik Erikson suggested how the resolution or lack of resolution at every developmental stage can impact individuals throughout their lifespan. Remember, Erik Erikson deemed that period of adolescence as a time of either having an identity or having role confusion about one's identity. And he said that this, age approximation or stage took place in between 12 to 18 years of age, and really a favorable outcome was fidelity, really being sure, having faith and trust in who one is. Erik Erikson, again, was focused primarily on psychosocial development and identity achievement versus identity confusion. So adolescents who successfully resolve this stage achieve identity resolution, and adolescents who do not successfully resolve this stage have identity confusion that can be lifelong or persistent, until it's resolved. So Dr. James Marcia based his work on Erikson's theory, and said that an identity crisis has 4 different states. The first one being what's called identity foreclosure, the second one being what's called identity moratorium, the third stage, identity diffusion, and the fourth stage, identity achievement. So Dr. Marcia said that these adolescents go through each stage for varying lengths of time and not necessarily in the same order. So they don't necessarily have to take place in this chronological linear order that I just mentioned. So again, identity foreclosure happens, it's not a crisis. It's more like a blind acceptance of identity and values that are imposed by the family. Identity moratorium is viewed more of a crisis type of a stage. It's an active exploration of identity without making a commitment. So it would be an example of that would maybe a teen that's trying out for all different kinds of clubs and activities. Maybe one day wants to join the soccer team, the next time is wants to join a rock band, and then maybe the next week might be trying illicit drugs with a friend. So it really creates anxiety for a teen. The teen really wants the world to make sense. Identity diffusion is not listed as a crisis. So there's really no exploration of identity, no commitment to any values or identity. The teenager in this particular stage may find identity development overwhelming, and it can be associated with isolation and depression. So identity achievement now is not in crisis, but probably have experienced a moratorium state, according to Dr. Marcia. It's really defined as possessing a well-defined personal values and self-concept and a strong sense of identity. Susan Harder is another researcher. It talks about self-esteem and really it talked about the gender differences in adolescent self-esteem. Boys overall tend to have higher self-esteem than girls, and girls tend to tie self-esteem to appearance and impossible standards of beauty. And what's known as this false self behavior is really explored by Dr. Harder, and you definitely want to put a circle or a star around this term false self behavior because you will see it again on our quiz number 3. So adolescents who lack social support may put on a false front in order to obtain desired support. So they're compromising their true identity. So later, teens may come to grips with who they really are. But before they're able to do this, many teens go through a stage where they're really putting forth this false self behavior. So an example of that may be a child, let's say a teenager that's in foster care that's really feeling very lonely, but may present at school as somebody who's really gregarious and social and happy and up all of the time. So that would be an example of a false self kind of a behavior. Talking about gender role development, between the ages of 7 and 13, gender roles are egalitarian and flexible. But we do know research tells us by age 16, gender roles tend to become more traditional for teens. There's this gender intensification. So boys tend to then to adopt much more traditional gender roles, and girls have more egalitarian roles. So why do you think this is? What are the differences between genders? Well, research overall tells us that boys tend to be more aggressive, daring, action-oriented, achievement-oriented. Girls tend to be more people-oriented, more emotional. Sexism is something that is encountered by a majority of girls. Sexual harassment, whether it's in an academic setting, athletic setting, by teachers, parents, boys and girls. So there's also an important shift here that data is pointing to, that there's no longer a gap in math skills between boys and girls, which is wonderful. It used to be that we were citing research studies that were saying that girls tend to do worse on math achievement tests than boys, but there's no longer a gap. We talk about sexual identity formation. 2 to 10% of Americans identify as gay, lesbian, or bisexual. And until 1973, homosexuality was listed in the DSM, or the Diagnostic Statistical Manuals of Mental Health Disorders, as a mental disorder. So Dr. David Satcher, who's an MD, PhD, former U.S. Surgeon General, said that sexual orientation is usually determined by adolescents, if not earlier, and there is no valid scientific evidence that sexual orientation can be changed. A national survey of 1,752 college students by the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States reveals that 48% of self-identified gay and bisexual college students became aware of their sexual preference in high school, while 26% found their true sexual identity in college. The same survey revealed that 20% of self-identified gay and bisexual men knew that they were gay or bisexual in high school, and 17% said they knew in grade school. This survey also disclosed that 6% self-identified gay or bisexual women knew that they were gay or bisexual in junior high school, and 11% knew in grade school. Are you born gay? So there have been twin studies of identical twins where one is gay. There is a 52% chance the other is gay. In fraternal twins, when one is gay, there's a 22% chance that the other is gay. In non-twin siblings, when one is gay, there is a 6 to 10% chance the sibling is gay. And twins who share an amniotic sac almost always have the same sexual orientation. So every time a mother gives birth to a son, the likelihood that the next son will be gay increases by 30%. So this suggests a hormonal or immune response from the mother in response to male babies. So there's just a finger lengths of studies here. Some studies point to a gay gene, and this is still a very contentious, hotly debated issue here in the United States. So some support for sexual identity. It's important to note that support for gay, lesbian, and bisexual teens was not readily available until the 1990s. So these teens were unfortunately frequent victims of bullying. They remained in the closet, because of fear of discovery and a lot of self-loathing, criticism from parents and siblings for not adhering to gender stereotypes. And most recent data suggests that most parents are supportive when a child reveals their sexual identity, and when parents are not supportive, psychological difficulties as well as risky behaviors can result and ensue. So we're going to take a short break here, and when we return at the next part of our lecture series, we'll begin by talking about transgendered identity. So I look forward to seeing you in a few moments.